Everyone. I am Joel Fishman, President of the Public Diplomacy Council of America. It is my privilege to welcome you today to our mid-month forum brought to you by PDCA, the USC Annenberg Center on Communication Leadership and Policy, and the GWU Institute for Public Diplomacy and Global Communication. Today, we feature Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Camille Dawson. Ms. Dawson, and U.S. Ambassador to Chile, Bernadette M. Meehan, whom we featured on July 8th, are the first recipients of PDCA's Award for Public Diplomacy Leadership by senior officers. We honor Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Dawson today for integrating public diplomacy strategies across the range of foreign policy objectives in support of U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. We note that you have built effective partnerships between the State Department and DOD military commands, leading to better PD coordination. We at PDCA place high value on whole of government embrace in the practice of effective public diplomacy, and we applaud your leadership in making this happen. The great sage Bruce Lee once said, "If you want to learn to swim, jump in the water." We, whose active professional careers are behind us, but whose commitment to advocating for excellence in public diplomacy and the critical role it plays in our world is still with us, know that the water in which we swim is changing. Read the op-ed in this morning's Post, Amanda Bennett's op-ed that went online in the Washington Post this morning on China and disinformation. We rely on current leaders like Camille Dawson to tell us about new creative strokes that current practitioners employ in water that is clouded by adversaries employing techniques to mislead. We rely on you and amplify the work you are doing to bring us into a new age of public diplomacy excellence. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We're looking forward to learning with you. And I now turn the program over to my colleague and longtime friend, Ambassador Cynthia Eford, co-chair of PDCA's Award Committee, joining us today from her home in the great swing state of Wisconsin. Cynthia.
Thanks, Joel. I'm here as a representative, the co-chair of the awards committee. Also, for those members who are outside of the DC area. And finally, all our members who are teaching as a way of encouraging the effective use and understanding of public diplomacy. But in every role, I'm a supporter of the awards program as a way to honor the creative use of public diplomacy and as a way of creating effective diplomacy strategies. Now, my main role today is to help gather questions. And so for those of you who are participating outside the room through webinar, I ask you to put your questions into the Q&A segment that you will find at the bottom of your screen. If it's not showing, hit the more 3 dots and it will appear. And then we will pass those questions on during the session. My last job right now is to welcome Paul Kutrovsky, who is a career member of the Senior Executive Service, the Director of the Office of Policy Planning and Research for Public Diplomacy. I guess we still call it RIPPER. And I'll ask him to please introduce our guest of honor. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. I was so happy to accept the honor of introducing you, Camille. When the PDCA Awards Committee started creating this new award for PD leadership by a senior leader, one of the real drives, the real goals of this award was to demonstrate how PD ladders into that broader foreign policy context, how it becomes integrated as a core part of the strategic work that we do as diplomats. And I can't think of anyone who's done a better job of exemplifying how that happens at a global level here in Washington. From the work that you have done leading on the interagency work, really getting state in a position to lead with our colleagues in the DOD to help them understand how the other elements of the interagency contribute to our policy goals. From the work within the Bureau, with to marry together these big strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific strategy, the work we've done on the quad that you have blissfully behind you and not in front of you this week. With the work that we do in the information space and the human dimension, I in all of my time in EAP, visiting EAP, traveling, talking to our hosts, every single place talks about how for people to our work pushing back against the PRC, building a positive vision for what the future is in the region. And EAP would not be doing what it is today if it weren't for the leadership provided there. So thank you. I can't wait to hear what you have to share with this whole group and to really hear the story of what I've been able to watch over the last 15 years with you. So Camille, the floor is yours. You're looking forward like wolves.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here today. First of all, I would like to thank the Public Diplomacy Council of America, Joel, Cynthia, all of your members here today, both in the room and online. I am also personally particularly pleased to see 4 of my former bosses from Mission China all gathered here in this room today. They are the people from whom I learned to be a public diplomacy officer. So my huge gratitude to all of you. And I want to thank Paul and the entire Undersecretariat of Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. It is the work of that Undersecretariat that is crucial to the success of advancing U.S. foreign policy. And so many of you are represented in the room and online today. So thank you. And I want to acknowledge a number of my colleagues from the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs who are here in Washington and across our nearly 50 missions, our 50 consulates and embassies across the region. The work that I am being recognized for today is actually their work. So I am so pleased to be able to speak to you today on behalf of the wonderful people who make our public diplomacy wins possible every day. And these individuals who make success possible do it also by making every single day a positive experience for those of us who have the privilege to work with these dedicated professionals. When I think about my colleagues, both those who I used to work for and those who I now have the privilege of leading in our EAP Office of Press and Public Diplomacy, I think about commitment, I think about creativity, and I think about camaraderie. And I hope that everyone that is here today has had or will have the good fortune that I have had to be surrounded by such brilliant and kind coworkers who over time, as I think many of you can relate to, feel more like extended family than office mates. So to those of you watching and in the room who are part of my work family, I offer my heartfelt thank you for all that you do. So, in almost 25 years, the Department of State, I have seen how the role of public diplomacy has evolved. Now, more than ever, it is critical for all of us to continually make the case that public diplomacy is not subordinate to or separate from the policy process. Rather, effective public diplomacy is what enables smart policy making that will be sustainable over the long run by factoring in public sentiment, human relationships, benign and malign influence efforts, credible voices, and the very real but often overlooked value of soft power. In my current role, I am responsible for the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, press and public diplomacy, as well as our regional strategy and security policies. So that's everything from managing our foreign assistance programs to congressional liaison work to traditional security coordination and cybersecurity programs, to guiding our minilateral and multilateral work via the Quad and other organizations. And it's overseeing implementation of the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. Not that long ago, these areas of policy responsibility operated pretty distinctly from public diplomacy work, but that is no longer the case. In the current media and information age, foreign and domestic publics play an increasingly large role in shaping the direction of international policy. In the EAP Bureau, we have responded to this shift by more strategically integrating public diplomacy strategies across the range of our foreign policy objectives. Our foreign policy goals are guided by the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. Launched in February 2022, the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy lays out our vision for an Indo-Pacific region that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. Over the past 2.5 years, the EAP Bureau, in very close coordination with our sister bureau, South and Central Asian Affairs, or SCA, who manages the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific, has been working on building a lattice work of partners and allies to contribute to building the collective capacity of the region. But before I turn speaking about the affirmative vision that we have been advancing with and for the region, I want to talk a bit about what we have done internally within our own bureaucracy to do this work most effectively. Let me start with the merging of our press and public diplomacy functions. As a bureau, East Asian and Pacific Affairs had historically maintained separate press and public diplomacy offices. We recognized that that led to duplication of efforts and also meant there were some gaps in our approach to strategic communications and public diplomacy impact across the East Asian and Pacific region. So we set out to combine two offices, the Office of Public Affairs and the Office of Public Diplomacy. And after years of effort by dedicated colleagues, and with special recognition to my colleague Brian Bevell, who's not here today, who oversaw these efforts, that merger was finally completed in early 2023. Today, we have one EAP Office of Press and Public Diplomacy, or PPD. Through this reorganization, we established new functionalities within the office: a strategic communications unit, a domestic outreach coordinator, and 3 public diplomacy liaisons who are embedded at Department of Defense Command. Each of these functions enhance our capacity to tell our story more effectively, and to do that through better interagency coordination. A key part of this reorganization was the creation of the Strategic Communications, or STRATCOM team, which leverages insights from both internal and external analysis, academic research, and opinion polling to make informed recommendations for how to engage foreign audiences through proactive, affirmative messaging in support of our key Indo-Pacific strategy objectives. This STRATCOM team is now part of planning for every major policy initiative in the EAP Bureau. And my role in overseeing both PPD team and regional security policy team means I can be sure this is actually happening. Our intra-office teams have formed the habits of cooperation that will, I hope and believe, endure for the long term. I'm also pleased to note that some of the best practices developed by EAP's strategic communications team have been replicated successfully in other bureaus to great effect. Our STRATCOM team has developed many comprehensive public diplomacy engagement plans, or PDEPs, for those of you looking for a new acronym, which provides our communicators with a comprehensive guide to the audiences we seek to reach, the behavior we want to affect, the content we need to share, and the tools and tactics available to deliver our messages. All of this helps to advance aligned, accurate messages about our priorities and action. The team has also paved the way for improving interagency messaging coordination by partnering with the National Security Council to lead on initiatives such as the U.S. Indo-Pacific Strategy Launch and Anniversary Campaign, key AUKUS announcements, Pacific Engagement Campaign efforts, and Quad leaders and ministerial meetings, including the Quad Summit that we had just this past weekend in Wilmington. These engagement plans enable hosts and other key messengers to effectively highlight the many benefits that our partnership has brought to the Indo-Pacific region. And we share these far enough in advance of major events so they can be adapted by host for the local audience and to ensure that the local context is taken into account. We found that delivering our proactive and affirmative message is among the most effective ways to combat our adversaries' disinformation or information manipulation campaigns. Both we and our competitors recognize the key role the media sector plays in the health of a democracy. And we also know the myriad challenges that media outlets around the world have faced in recent years. Because of that, we are supporting independent media and building sector-wide resilience to foreign information manipulation by supporting news outlets across the Indo-Pacific region through a multi-year initiative that combines mentorship, access to high-quality independent sources of news content, and a capacity-building curriculum that builds key journalism and counter-disinformation skills, while also addressing some of the root causes of financial instability among media outlets, a key factor in the sector's vulnerability to foreign information manipulation. On that note, let me turn to our approach to the China challenge. In recent years, we have seen the PRC become more repressive at home and more assertive abroad. We know that PRC vastly outspends the United States on their version of public diplomacy. The uneven playing field poses challenges, but we are finding ways to be strategic and effective within the limitations of our human and financial resources. The State Department is integrating public diplomacy resources and expertise into our PRC policy formulation and execution. We have embedded officers from our EAP PPD office, from our press, public diplomacy, and strategic communications teams in the Office of China Coordination, also known as China House. This means that whether we are answering an inquiry from a journalist, speaking to Chinese exchange program participants, supporting Secretary Blinken's engagement with students in the PRC, or developing strategic messaging plans, our PD team is at the table. To ensure effective strategic communications in the region, we knew we also needed experts providing perspective from the field and not just in Washington. So we placed STRATCOM officers in Auckland and in Manila. The insights these officers provide mean that we are better able to listen, learn, and adapt our recommended approaches based on regional context. These regional STRATCOM officers track adversarial narratives in the region, engage allies and partners who are eager to coordinate on messaging approaches, and inform U.S. government messaging strategies for the Pacific and Southeast Asia so that we can advance an affirmative, strength-based vision of U.S. policy goals. EAP also collaborated with the Bureau of Global Public Affairs, or GPA, in creating the department's new Mandarin Foreign Language Spokesperson position. The role, which has just recently launched, will greatly enhance the department's ability to message to Chinese language audiences around the world. EAP has also expanded our regional China officer program. We now have around 20 officers with China expertise posted around the world. As many as a quarter of these officers at any given point in time have been public diplomacy career track officers. Their roles include supporting and empowering our PD teams overseas to developing affirmative messaging campaigns that are responsive to local context. Now I'd like to turn to an important element of interagency coordination that has implications not only for the EAP region, but for all regions. Both in the field and in Washington, we've looked for ways to work with the Department of Defense to ensure all of our messaging efforts are supporting interagency foreign policy objectives. Through EAP's 3 pilot and now permanent PD liaison positions at Indo-PACOM, SOCOM, and SOCPAC, positions that we established in 2021, we have enabled better interagency coordination on public communications that relate to issues at the intersection of state and DOD equities and on military information support operations, or MISO program. The PD liaison positions play a vital role in facilitating coordination between our regional bureau, press and public diplomacy offices, our colleagues in PD sections at posts, and DOD colleagues who are working on these military information support operations programs. And I am pleased to say that after several years of painstaking effort alongside colleagues across the interagency, and a couple of whom are notably in the audience here today, we were able to work collaboratively with DOD to put in place a mechanism that goes beyond encouraging coordination and now requires that DOD seek state concurrence before the enactment of MISO programs. The Secretary of Defense signed the MISO Interagency Coordination and Concurrence Policy Memo in February 2024. And this requires DOD to obtain Chief of Mission concurrence before executing any proposed MISO series. This ensures that the State Department and our embassy platforms remain in the lead on communicating with overseas audiences. Now let me turn to communicating with domestic audiences. EAP has made it a priority to explain why the Indo-Pacific region matters to America. In other words, trying to make U.S. foreign policy less foreign to American audiences. We inform fellow Americans how U.S. foreign policy in the region impacts everyday lives of the people in the U.S. and in the region. And we describe how that work creates American jobs, benefits our economy, and enriches our educational institutions. Our domestic outreach team's efforts help us forge new institutional linkages and enlist civil society, academia, diaspora communities, local governments, and private business to champion international ties that benefit both the United States and the Indo-Pacific region. In 2023, EAP successfully conducted and completed more than 500 domestic outreach activities in over 20 states, positioning EAP at the top of the domestic outreach leaderboard among all State Department regional bureaus. Now, much of that outreach was directly connected to our APEC host year in 2023. During the 2023 U.S. hosted APEC Leaders Week in San Francisco, my colleagues and I supported our U.S. APEC team by engaging with academics, business leaders, and diaspora communities to enlist support for the U.S. government vision of APEC and its role in advancing our Indo-Pacific strategy. This year, 2024, we have already conducted more than 100 activities for domestic outreach, and another 100 have been arranged in states ranging from New York to Illinois, Alabama, Texas, Washington, and California, and many others in between. I have personally visited countless universities, think tanks, media outlets, state and local government offices, chambers of commerce, and other institutions, and others across the EAP Bureau have done the same. I can tell you that there is huge appetite in communities across the U.S. to hear about what we are doing and to find ways to expand these linkages. Now I'd like to turn to our policy approach to the Indo-Pacific region and some of the ways we have used public diplomacy to advance our policy. The Indo-Pacific region, stretching from our Pacific coastline to the Indian Ocean, is home to over half the world's population, makes up nearly 60% of global GDP, and accounts for 2/3 of global economic growth. We have long recognized the Indo-Pacific as vital to our security and prosperity. 5 of our treaty allies are in the Indo-Pacific, and 7 of the world's largest militaries are in the region. The United States has more than $2 trillion in two-way trade with the region, and exports to and investments from the Indo-Pacific support almost 4 million American jobs. This decade has made both the considerable promise and challenges of the region more explicit. As Secretary Blinken has stated, what happens in the Indo-Pacific will, more than any other region, shape the trajectory of the world in the 21st century. It is therefore ever more important to partner with those who share in our vision of a world an Indo-Pacific region that is free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. And the defining feature of our approach under the Indo-Pacific strategy is to work in common cause with allies and partners within and beyond the region to invest in the collective capacity of allies, partners, and friends. Since the release of the Indo-Pacific strategy in 2022, we have taken concrete steps to make our Indo-Pacific strategy a reality. At the core of the strategy is working together with our allies and partners to build connections, strengthen the regional architecture, and address shared challenges. We have invested deeply in developing a lattice work of strong and mutually reinforcing coalitions to build that collective capacity. With our engagement with existing regional architecture, such as APEC, ASEAN, the Pacific Islands Forum, and the Indian Ocean Rim Association, to newer, more nimble mini-lateral partnerships, such as AUKUS, the Quad, Partners in the Blue Pacific, and trilateral cooperation with Japan and the ROK, and Japan and the Philippines. All of these efforts build on strong people-to-people ties, deeply rooted in trust and personal relationships. U.S. public diplomacy programs strengthen these ties and engage governments opinion leaders, media, and civil society in support of mutually beneficial goals. That's why we have increased investment in our youth networks, have opened new embassies to engage foreign publics in the Pacific Islands, and are upgrading our partnerships across the region to enable relationship building with different groups of stakeholders. Prior to the launch of the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, I was fortunate to join colleagues from the National Security Council for a series of conversations with governments and key stakeholders from across the region and with countries in other parts of the world that share a similar vision for the Indo-Pacific. In those conversations, we laid out key ideas in our draft version of the strategy and then spent most of the time listening. We asked what we should adjust to make the strategy more responsive to the needs of the region itself, and partners did not hold back from sharing their input. As a result of that input, the strategy that we launched is stronger. We knew that for the strategy to gain traction, we needed support from publics and governments globally. We also needed our own U.S. government teams to understand the key points of the strategy. So we developed both internal and external briefing materials that we sent to interagency partners and to our embassies and consulates across the region. We put together social media content and a slide deck presentation that posts could customize for local audiences that outlined the key features of the strategy and how it was applicable in the local context. Overseas, chiefs of mission and political, economic, and public diplomacy section personnel have drawn on that content for countless meetings and public remarks. And my colleagues and I in Washington have done the same with events across the United States and in our travels overseas. In fact, I may have even delivered some version of that presentation to institutions represented in the audience here today. Even after the initial extensive consultations that we did during the drafting of the strategy, we knew we needed to continue to refine our approach. We worked with the East-West Center as they facilitated 3 conferences held in Washington, Honolulu, and Jakarta that brought together thought leaders from around the US, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific region to review Indo-Pacific strategy implementation after a year. The insights gained from those conversations allowed us to further fine-tune our strategy. On both the first and second anniversaries of the release of the strategy, our state team co-led with the NSC as we published fact sheets and revised publicity materials that laid out the significant achievements under the 5 pillars of the Indo-Pacific strategy. And starting with the Secretary of State and the Deputy Secretary down to Assistant Secretary Dan Crittenbrink, myself, office directors, diplomats overseas, seasoned civil service officers, and entry-level officers. We got out there and spoke to just about anyone who would listen. We delivered keynote speeches, participated in panels organized by think tanks, and briefed domestic and international media. In short, we tried to ensure that our public diplomacy reached the public. And within the Indo-Pacific strategy, there are many elements that not only needed public amplification, but that directly call on our public diplomacy community to implement programs. I'll share a few examples of that. Just over a year ago, President Biden and the leaders of Japan and the Republic of Korea inaugurated a new era of trilateral partnership hosted in Camp David. The summit was truly historic, transforming relations between Japan and the Republic of Korea and contributing immeasurably to the success of our Indo-Pacific strategy. Camp David, leaders committed to strengthening people-to-people ties, including among our young people and students, and announced the formation of a Young Trilateral Leaders Summit, a regional youth leadership conference to bring Korean, Japanese, and American leaders together. The first such summit was held in Busan in July 2024, and with it, we launched the Young Trilateral Leaders Network, ensuring that participants will stay connected. The second Trilateral Youth Summit is slated to take place in 2025 in Japan. In 2023, we launched undersecretary level bilateral public diplomacy and education dialogues with both Japan and the Republic of Korea. Public diplomacy dialogue with the Republic of Korea, which was chaired by then Undersecretary Liz Allen, covered the role of bilateral people-to-people exchanges, subnational diplomacy, regional public diplomacy cooperation, and youth engagement. Meanwhile, the inaugural high-level dialogue on education with the government of Japan, chaired by then Assistant Secretary for Education and Cultural Affairs and current acting Undersecretary Lee Satterfield, featured commitments by representatives from both countries to expand education and research collaboration through greater student, faculty, and staff exchanges, as well as promoting greater inter-university and university private sector collaboration. Additionally, we signed bilateral MOUs for countering foreign information manipulation with both Japan and the ROK. These new agreements enable the U.S. government to better counter foreign information manipulation in a coordinated way to create a more resilient information environment. One of the most consequential things we have done in the region since the launch of the Indo-Pacific strategy is to expand our presence in the Pacific Islands. In the past year and a half, we have opened 3 new embassies in the Pacific Islands, each of which include public diplomacy staff. We opened in the Solomon Islands and in Tonga in 2023 and in Vanuatu in July of this year. And the Department of State has increased staffing across our public islands post in the last 5 years to further engage with our Pacific neighbors, connect U.S. programs and resources with needs on the ground, and build people-to-people ties. For public diplomacy, that includes 8 new Foreign Service Officer public diplomacy positions in the Pacific Islands, as well as several local staff positions. The Young Pacific Leaders Program strengthens linkages between emerging leaders from Pacific Island countries and the United States. And like the Young Trilateral Leaders and YSEALI programs, it includes U.S. citizens among the participants. Over the past 6 years, we have invested over $6 million in the Young Pacific Leaders Initiative. We've supported annual conferences, grants, and workshops for 15 countries in the Pacific. And the influence and reach of this program means that young people are actually able to get a seat at the table. Despite this important work in the Pacific, we have not lost focus on Southeast Asia. We have seen an unprecedented expansion in U.S.-ASEAN relations since we elevated our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership in November of 2022. And in 2023, during President Biden's visit to Hanoi, we elevated U.S.-Vietnam relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership to support our shared vision for broader bilateral cooperation with government and people of Vietnam. And U.S.-Indonesia relationship was also elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership during Indonesian President Widodo's November 2023 visit to the White House. In recognition of the value of the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative Exchange Program in advancing U.S. policy across Southeast Asia, EAP worked with the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs on a White House commitment to double the number of YSEALI academic and professional exchanges. And the first expanded cohorts for this program will arrive in spring 2025. As YSEALI celebrated its milestone 10-year anniversary in late 2023, we announced the formation of a special YSEALI Next Executive Steering Committee that has empowered a diverse set of YSEALI alumni to guide the program's growth for the next decade. And lastly, I want to turn to the Quad. We see the Quad as a central minilateral cooperation mechanism in the region that is focused on demonstrating what democracies can deliver. As one of the department's co-coordinators for the Quad, I spent a great deal of my time focused on Quad work And I see the close interplay of public diplomacy and policy teams as we look to deliver for the Quad. Our Quad partners, Australia, India, and Japan, are deeply invested in the success of the region and are advancing an ambitious agenda to benefit the people in the region through concrete initiatives, some of which are directly implemented by our public diplomacy teams, and some of which are advanced through our public communications. Announcements made at the Quad Summit this past weekend were focused on deliverables such as a new Quad Cancer Moonshot, providing humanitarian assistance and disaster, expanding Coast Guard and maritime security, countering foreign information manipulation and disinformation, and investing in the next generation of leaders through Quad exchange programs. For instance, the Quad STEM Fellows program is designed to build ties among the next generation of scientists and technologists dedicated to advancing innovation and research for positive public impact and elevating their ability to use science and technology for social good. I'm happy to share that the newest cohort of Quad STEM Fellows includes students not only from the 4 Quad countries, but also from across Southeast Asia. So, of course, this is just a sampling of the outstanding work that our public diplomacy professionals are advancing across the region. I haven't even touched on what our teams are doing in support of North Korean human rights issues, for example, or how we are using sports diplomacy and cultural diplomacy in impactful ways across the region, and much, much more. In conclusion, I hope my comments today have furthered your understanding of how our public diplomacy team in EAPs, in partnership with broader public diplomacy apparatus at state and across the interagency, is strategically advancing our Indo-Pacific strategy by ensuring that public diplomacy informs rather than simply responds to policy development. In other words, we are in at the takeoff, not just on the landing. I'm proud of the major strides we've made to this end over the past few years, and I look forward to seeing how these efforts will enable public diplomacy practitioners to continue to play a leading role, not just at the State Department, but across the interagency to inform and engage priority audiences globally. Thank you again to PDCA for the opportunity to represent the incredible team of public diplomacy professionals across the EAP Bureau today. You know, we have all heard the saying, which is sometimes attributed to Confucius, sometimes to Mark Twain, sometimes to an unknown Princeton professor, that is, find a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. So I would not go so far as to say that I never have to work, and I know that the team that I represent works incredibly hard every day. But I do feel immense gratitude that in my daily work, I am surrounded by dedicated colleagues who are driven by our mission of using smart, soft power to advance security and prosperity and improve the lives of people at home and around the region. With that, thank you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, and let me extend a welcome on behalf of the University of Southern California. We partner with PDCA 1, 2, 3 times a month, sometimes in public diplomacy programs. And there's a bit of a unique quality to this one. We've used the rooftop, which is under construction right now, so we can't use it. We use the 4th floor, but we believe this is the first public program of any kind on the 2nd floor of the building. So we should have your name somewhere, and we'll. Also, I should recognize my colleague Len Osahi, who just arrived a few hours ago from India. He is a newly appointed senior leader in the Center on Public Diplomacy at USC in Los Angeles. So and he wanted to be here today for the lunch. So he came from Los Angeles the long way via India. Lots of free flyer miles. Before we get to Q&A, which we'll have in a minute, I want to recognize Elliot Tello. He's here. Ah, yes. She comes from her native North Dakota by way of 3 continents of hosts, and is with us today to talk about the significance of this award at this ceremony.
Good afternoon. I just am honored to be here with all of you to recognize Camille Dawson and her contributions in this well-earned accomplishment of the first ever award for public diplomacy leadership by a senior official. And I want to thank PDCA for your advocacy of PD. We so appreciate all of the work that you continue to do on behalf of all of us. We all know that relationships between people are increasingly shaping our bilateral relationships. Public diplomacy is foundational to every single foreign policy priority. This fact, coupled with the growing threat of foreign state information manipulation and the explosion of information resources, means that the work of public diplomacy is both urgent and critically important. Camille Dawson is both a visionary and pragmatic leader. I think we've heard I'm exhausted hearing all of the things that she's been doing and leading her team on such policy importance of and making sure that the imperative of public diplomacy and building effective partnerships, not only across the State Department enterprise, but across the interagency. Thanks to Camille Dawson's work, we are replicating the work with DOD, both in Southcom and UCOM, and really modeled after the exemplary work that they've done. I was fortunate to see Camille Dawson in action when I was PAO in Brussels at the US mission to the EU, when she helped relaunch our US-EU China dialogue and our US-EU Indo-Pacific consultations. Thanks to Camille Dawson and the interagency team, we've continued to expand our partnership with the EU regarding the Indo-Pacific. This is just one example of the truly global contribution that she's made throughout her career. She evangelizes, showing up matters. Talking about frequent flyer miles, whether it's across the United States to help the American people understand the work that we do for them, or to the Pacific Island countries where our investment in new embassies personifies our long-term investment in our relationship. It is this relationship building that I've seen countless times in her support of youth leadership programs, of MOUs to protect the information space and combat disinformation, and her investment in the PD cadre and the people that help make this all come to life. It's thanks to her resolve that we have reached unprecedented levels of cooperation in the region. Camille Dawson's work in the region demonstrates the kind of partnership and transparency that's in stark contrast with our competitors. A transparency that undercuts the effectiveness of malign actors, disinformation campaigns, and positions the United States as a true partner in the region. Investment in youth and their future through a variety of programs, in independent media, in cultural heritage, in every single aspect of life in the Indo-Pacific. Today, thanks to Dawson's public diplomacy vision and achievements, our partnerships in the Indo-Pacific are strong, productive, and ready for the opportunities ahead. In light of her contributions to her team in foreign policy and in recognition of this PDCA award, I'm delighted in joining all of you in celebrating my esteemed colleague and friend, Deputy Assistant Secretary. Congratulations.
Do I join you there now? Okay, thank you.
The way we're going to do Q&A is that I can recognize people here in the room, and my colleagues could be an effort will recognize people who are online.
Okay,
Last time we saw each other was in South Africa.
I think so, and that was quite a long time ago. I was there from 2013 to 2016.
Yeah, we need to be closer together.
Oh, okay, here we go. All right.
I see a hand. Please.
Camille, congratulations. It's wonderful to see all of the incredible work that you and the EAP team have done to be recognized in this fashion. So first of all, congratulations and thank you for all that you've done.
Thank
did
you. And thank you
recognize-
for coming before to lay it down.
Absolutely. I did recognize a few things in your TikTok that I really appreciated. But one thing that's new, I wanted to learn a little bit more about the department's new Mandarin language spokesperson. Can you tell us a little bit where that person is going to be posted and what new strategies you're working on to make sure that our messages in Mandarin are getting to the places we want them to? You and I know this has been a challenge for our groups. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So the department's new Mandarin language spokesperson has just recently started in that role. His name is Ryan Roberts, and he is doing this job in a bit of a pilot phase. A new longer term spokesperson position is being advertised as well. But the position is based in Washington, and we intend for the position to stay domestically based. The reason is that we know there are audiences globally who are Mandarin speaking, and we thought it made the most sense to have the person located in Washington rather than any one particular country in the region. The idea with the spokesperson position is that they play a similar role to many of our other foreign language spokespeople that the department currently has, which is to take content that is outlining our key policy objectives and put it in language so that audiences around the world who are Mandarin speaking have access to the first person voice of US policy rather than having to access it via some sort of filter. So we have a large number of posts around the world that have audiences that are Mandarin speaking. We are sharing the content that's produced by the new spokesperson with those posts so that they can share it directly with audiences via their website, social media properties, pushing it out directly to Mandarin speaking media outlets and communities. And as noted, this is just very recently launched. So inevitably we'll do some growing along the way and identify ways in which we can most effectively deploy the Mandarin language spokesperson and the materials that are produced by the broader team that is based in the Bureau of Global Public Affairs, and that has very close coordination with the domestic bureau as well as our post in the region.
Fabulous. Great. Congrats.
Sure.
Sherry Mueller, American University. Would you comment a little bit more on what you did around APEC? I was particularly interested in the fact that Xi Jinping hosted his Iowa friends in San Francisco. And I just wondered what were some of the things around APEC from our perspective.
Yeah, so there was a very large public diplomacy and public messaging component of our US APEC host year. And she will be embarrassed for me calling her out, especially because she's holding a camera taking a photo right now. But Suku, standing in the back of the room, was really the leader of our public messaging work around APEC. And Sue and an extended US APEC team did a remarkable job of getting out to I can't say every corner of the US or every state, but so many places around the US to explain what APEC is, why the United States involvement with APEC benefits our own local communities. And so at the APEC Leaders Week in San Francisco, that was sort of a condensed version where we had the opportunity to get out and speak with a very significant number of stakeholder groups. So with a major event like APEC Leaders Week, there are so many groups that hold sort of side events. So I personally was very fortunate to be able to do some of that direct engagement. I spoke to and engaged with a number of groups, including several different gatherings that were hosted by organizations like Global Women in Asia, leadership groups focused around bringing together civil society and the private sector. We engaged in multiple settings with Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander groups that are based in the greater San Francisco Bay area. Hearing from them about their own community concerns and the ways in which their heritage ties into the work we are doing in the Indo-Pacific region. They are able to provide insights and share with us how U.S. foreign policy impacts them at home, but also their extended friend and family network, in other parts of the region. And we spoke with media, again, explaining what is APEC, what is the U.S. role, what are the priorities we're trying to advance. And of course, there were, the actual leader engagement. As you noted, there was huge focus on the meeting at Woodside, California, between President Biden and Xi Jinping. And we heard coming out of that and some of Xi Jinping's engagements, also a focus on people-to-people connections, both in our public diplomacy related work, but also through business community and private sector.
Member Mark Sessions.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Roger Rolando Reyes. I am an intercultural and international communications student at the School of International Service at American University. And a 2023 Charles B. Rangel International Graduate Diploma. I decided my track to be public diplomacy as of 2 weeks ago.
Great decision. You won't regret it.
This last year, I took a course with Ambassador Campbell, who was former ambassador to Mongolia, and currently I'm taking a public diplomacy course with Ambassador Tony Wayne. And in our presentation about 2 weeks ago, we focused a bit on GAI, generative artificial intelligence. From an operational effectiveness lens, how do you see artificial intelligence affecting the application process for programs like YCE or YPLI, especially considering the technological divide that's already present between urban and rural populations? Are there any future mechanisms, or are there any other things that might be related to that could be used to improve that process, you might?
Yeah, great question. And again, congratulations on your decision. So I'll first start by noting that the public diplomacy community within state has been very active in looking at the ways artificial intelligence can bring benefit to our work, how we can use AI to ensure that we are using our public diplomacy professionals, their time, to do the things that humans need to do, and to try to use AI to be able to automate or to shorten some of the time that's necessary for routine tasks. Some of those things include things like creating media summaries, looking at first draft translations. You know, there are many ways in which we can use AI to improve and make more effective our public diplomacy work. And we have spoken at length about the ways in which we might be able to employ artificial intelligence to do application review for some of our public diplomacy programs that have, by the way, huge numbers of applicants. When we look at some of our programs, you know, we might have 1,000 applicants for just a few slots. So of course there is a great deal of person hours dedicated to review. At this point in time, we have not found a way to remove the humans from the review process. And I don't envision that anytime in the near future, we will be able to, you know, take that intense human review out of the process. But there are ways that we can use AI to help us simplify the applicant review process. And we have teams in the Bureau of, in the Undersecretary's office who have been heavily engaged in the work of trying to identify the best ways to use AI in this regard. And we also have our teams in the field that post around the region who are, you know, doing trial and error to figure out some of the best ways. So I won't say we have a great solution identified for how we can use AI in the application review process, but we're trying out a lot of different methodologies. And I think that will continue to evolve over time, and that we will get to a place where we can do, you know, some of the initial intake and filtering so that it's only at later stages when we would it's most necessary to deploy.
Do you see anything from
We do, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
absolutely?
Okay, well, I have a question from Joe Werricks. He says, congratulations, Camille. And he would like you to talk a bit more about the USG's goals for the 2025 Expo in Osaka, and what exactly is EAP's role?
For those who are not tracking, the World Expo will be held in Osaka in 2025. We have some true experts on Expo issues in the room. I'm looking at B Camp in the back of the room, who was our consul general in Shanghai in 2010 when Shanghai hosted the World Expo at that time. She then went on also to work at Milan Expo. And we have Paul and Elia and others who have been deeply engaged in the planning for Expo 2025. The Expo unit, which is now an entity that did not exist in prior periods. So back when we were in Shanghai in 2010, there was not an Expo unit that sat under RIPR, our Office of Policy Plans and Research. We do now have, thankfully, that institutional mechanism, and through the very hard work of RIPR and many others involved, we also have the ability to access U.S. government funding in support of the pavilion, and that's not something that we have always benefited from. So it is very much a partnership between Ripper and the Expo unit, and EAP's Office of Press and Public Diplomacy. We have our wonderful office director here, Sarah Matthews, who's been heavily engaged in the work with the Expo unit to ensure that we in the regional bureau are supporting their work in Osaka. That is everything from ensuring that the Expo team on the ground, a very small team, a growing team on the ground in Osaka, is fully integrated into this, into the staff of our U.S. consulate in Osaka, that we are providing the coordination here in Washington between Ripper and the regional bureau, ensuring that we continually work to remind people across the U.S. whole of government of what the Expo is, what opportunities there are to engage with audiences from around the region during the Expo. This was just recently exemplified a week ago today, in fact, when Acting Undersecretary Lee Satterfield, along with Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, hosted a reception at Brand USA with private sector partners, speaking with them about the opportunities that the U.S. Pavilion provides, and the ways in which we hope the private sector will engage with us in support of this pavilion. As we look to the Expo itself, we do know it's a remarkable public diplomacy platform with millions and millions of visitors, not only from Japan, but from around the region and the world. The design of the U.S. Pavilion is truly remarkable. I encourage all of you to go and visit, but we in EAP will continue working in very close concert with the entire our family and the broader interagency to ensure that we put a spotlight on the work of the Expo, the opportunities that it presents. And we want to make sure that not only is this coming Expo a success, but that there is wide recognition of the Expo among the American public so that we can continue in future years to receive support for funding for Expo and for the U.S. role of the Expo. We do think the opportunity for the U.S. to host an Expo in future years would also really help to drive that awareness and recognition, because it has been many years since the U.S. has hosted, and that has resulted in, I think, somewhat of a memory loss among the American people about the value of World Expos, World Fairs, for those who knew it under its form.
And USC is proud to have been very much a partner in the Expos. In fact, Glenn, I think Shanghai was right after you and I opened the Shanghai USC facility. And so we had
That's right.
quite a few people.
We had amazing student ambassadors who each time I have seen them participate in such events are really the star of the show.
We have another question from.
No, I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, Pedro Reinhardt from the Dawson Analytics. Congratulations for the award. It's not easy to find data on Chinese public diplomacy. It's not very coherent or consistent. Do you have any mechanism in place to track the frequency and also the contents or the narrative of Chinese public diplomacy?
Yeah, good question. So I will not say that we have identified any comprehensive source that provides the data about Chinese public diplomacy efforts. There are many various methodologies that have been used, academics who have written on Chinese public diplomacy efforts, in which the sort of most frequently cited figure is that, or estimate is that China spends approximately 10 times what the United States spends on public diplomacy efforts. Again, that's very difficult to track the information exactly. You know, we do have a number of ways in which we track PRC narratives that are directed at the United States or at the work we are doing together with allies and partners globally. But in my experience, the most valuable tracking mechanism that we have, it is our public diplomacy professionals. It's our teams on the ground around the world who are able to access in language, local media content. They are able to see actions on the ground, able to understand the types of public diplomacy or public messaging programs that are being run by China. And it is their insights that are provided to us in Washington via a number of reporting mechanisms that inform our strategy. I will say, and I made reference to this in my remarks, it is important for us to understand the narratives and the tools and tactics that the PRC uses, but we are not focused on responding to what they are doing. We know that the single most effective thing the United States can do in terms of our public messaging is to put forth an affirmative message about what the United States, along with allies and partners, what we are doing to provide direct benefit to a need or a challenge that the region faces. And we've looked at this in all kinds of different ways, but time and time again, that's the bottom line. We do better when we talk about who we are, what we are for, and not who we are against.
Thank you for your questions. I believe our time is up. I hope that you'll all be back for our first Monday and in October 7th, program put together by my colleague Sherry Muller, who's going to close our program.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Deputy Assistant Secretary Dawson, thank you so much for your informative presentation and wonderful answers to excellent questions that have been put to you. It's easy to understand why you were the recipient of this very special award given by PDCA. We have a tiny gift for you for later. And I'm also delighted that your colleagues, Paul Kuszczowski and Ilya Taylor, were able to be with us today and actively participate and contribute to you. Special thanks to our moderators, Ambassador Cynthia Ebert in Wisconsin. Thank you for monitoring our online colleagues, and also Adam Clayton Powell. Thank you so much for your hosting of us here in this wonderful USC facility that is in progress, and also delighted to thank PDCA's partner, the Annenberg Center for Communication Leadership and Policy. Coordinators of today's event, Mike Korb, thank you so much. Gordon Dugood, and Ambassador Tony Wayne, who is not here, but this last year Mike and Tony chaired the awards committee that resulted in the special award. Gordon is working hard as co-chair of our program committee. And shout out to tech host Gabby Stahl, who is our PDCA graduate fellow, and her colleague Emily. Thanks for pitching. Upcoming PDCA events that Gordon wants me to underscore. Tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. is an in-person only event, second in a series on citizen diplomacy. Our panelists are Ambassador Eunice Reddy from the American Women for International Understanding. She's joined by Peggy Letter, who chairs an organization called Cultural Exchange for Diplomats, and also a Vice President, Stephen Quinn of Global Ties. This is part of a series we're doing that I hope those of you who are particularly interested in citizen diplomacy will be part of. We're building on that with a follow-up event with help from the Cox Foundation. And as Adam referred to, the PDCA First Monday Forum, October 7th. The program is entitled The Fate of Democracy, U.S. Presidential Elections, A View from Europe, and features a Dutch historian, Willem Post, who is the person who comments on our elections on Dutch television and has done this for 30 years and was a participant in our State Department's International Visitor, now leadership program, but back when he did it in 1995, it was the International Visitor Program. His most recent book on the United States is The Soul. Willem is a PDCA member, and I hope you will come join us at the International Student House. That will be a hybrid event. More information about these programs are on the PDCA website. There will be a recording of today's event available on the YouTube channel by the end of the week. Thank you all for attending. There are so many wonderful experts in the room. I wish we could keep the discussion going. But we look forward to seeing you at another PDCA event soon. Bye for now. We are adjourned.